Well, that was an absolute doozy, but the box is back. What could possibly be inside it now? Nothing. Nothing's inside it. Because guess what? We're going to streaming. Ah, yes. Modern technology. Makes me want to drink. Pulling up the old remote and booting up the old streaming services, trying to find that favorite show or movie, but you can't seem to find it, because guess what? Your favorite streaming service just took it off today, just when you wanted to watch it. So you gotta click through endlessly, scrolling through multiple AI slop pictures of thumbnails of movies and TV shows, none of them looking interesting, and after looking at 5, your brain just shuts off and it all looks the same. But today, we're going beyond belief.
Well, Alex, if there was ever a TV show that I would want to do a video about for this channel, I think it's this one.
It definitely is. Throughout all of our years of friendship, since we've known each other, there's always been one show that we consistently reference. You've probably seen us do this 100 times, and you might be wondering, what are they doing? Well, if you're a Star Trek fan, you might know, because the TV show we're talking about today is Beyond Belief, hosted by Jonathan Frakes. From seasons 1 to 4, I've watched every episode of Beyond Belief. I finished it today, and I was like, there were some days where I had to watch 4 or 5 episodes in a row, and watching 5 introductory establishing shots an episode, and 30 Jonathan Frakes puns a day. It was a lot. It was a lot, but now that it's all done, I still love the show.
Yeah, so I first discovered this show in early childhood, probably 7, 8 years old, elementary school, on the classic Sci-Fi Channel marathons that they would do from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. during the week of just different shows. And so any day I had off school or would stay home from school, I would turn on the Sci-Fi Channel and hope to God it was Beyond Belief. Or if it wasn't Beyond Belief, at least something else that I liked. But Beyond Belief was the one I was hoping for. And when it was, I was like, oh, thank God, thank the heavens. And got to watch, however many episodes that is, 7, 8 episodes of Beyond Belief. So I've seen all of the episodes, and through this, I made sure to watch all of them, and I made sure if there was any episodes that I didn't just automatically remember just from the segment name, to watch those. And there maybe were a couple that I had really no memory of at all, but there were a lot where, Jonathan Frakes would do his intro, and I'd be like, okay, and then like 30 seconds, 1 minute into the sketch, I'm like, oh, this is what happens. Because that's the thing about this show is the segments are so short that you could describe all of them in like one sentence. So you kind of know. And even if you don't know that exact one, there are so many recurring tropes that as soon as something starts to happen, you could probably guess what's going on.
Yeah. If you don't know, there's 5 different segments on the show, and are they true or are they fiction? It's really the only horror involvement show, audience involvement show, similar to a Jeopardy. I think that what makes it so unique, there's no other show like that, like Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or any of those game shows where it's like, you feel like you're part of it and you get to guess at the end, like, oh, was I right or was I wrong? I think that's what makes it really unique and really made it stick out to us, because I never really got into Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or any of those. But this one was fun, because I remember going over to your house back in the day, watching it on the lovely Chiller Network, on those reruns, and like we'd always guess, like, oh, what do you think? And then like there was something so ridiculous, like vampires or something. It's like, it happened. It's like, what do you mean that happened? And that's the fun part about the show, is it rode that fine line of like, this is absolutely ridiculous, but it could have happened. When part of me also wants a little bit of night visions, where it's like, in night visions, it can go completely off the wall of craziness. But in the realm of, did this happen, it has to be somewhat realistic. There's elements of like, ooh, is it a ghost? Is it a this? But it has to be real. It rides that fine line.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. It definitely does separate itself from every other show we're going to cover in this series, because it's not an anthology of one story per episode or split into 2 stories per episode. It is 5 different segments in every single 40-minute episode. And it gets to the point where you feel like you've seen them even if you haven't, going through them, because there's so many, and almost all of them are all new actors and everything. There's not a ton of recurring directors, except for Skip Skulnick was like the one main one who's behind this show. He's also producer of the show. He directed a lot of them. But it's new stories every time that all kind of fit in this same realm. And it's interesting, if you don't know the show, and you're like, okay, Beyond Belief, fact or fiction, is this like extreme crazy coincidences that are like amazing stories, or is it supernatural horror? This show is just everything. It's like anything that could fit the vibe of, could this really happen? It's in this show. It could be vampires, ghosts, a crazy miraculous coincidence. It's all in here, which I think is the right choice, because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, multiple different time periods, like the 1800s, the 90s, like from that decade. It's one of my favorite sets ever. People today are like, oh, are they going to recast Jonathan Majors as King? It's like, I think they should cast Jonathan Frakes as King. 'Cause you look at that set, he walks in, he's like just surrounded by different stories of the world, and he's almost like the Watcher from Marvel. He'd be the perfect character. That's what that whole set reminds me of. He's just telling you a story. You ever rode a mountain bike? You ever did this? You ever did that? And who better? Because that's exactly what that room reminds me of. Like this weird. It's like this. How do you describe it? It's like this dark office.
Yeah.
With like
it's almost like a lair.
Yeah,
or
this
something.
lair, and it's like the lighting is so moody. He has that black suit on. I mean, he had that tan suit in his like first or second episode. Like, we gotta get rid of that suit. That suit did not fit at all. And his puns. We gotta talk about. I mean,
yeah,
4 seasons of puns.
Will you vote for a victory for truth, or will you demand a recount?
It's like, credit to the writers for coming up with one. They weren't all good.
Is this story of the murderous donor flowing with reality, or is it just another bloody lie?
A lot of them were dog shit, but there were so many of them where after he said it, I'm like, okay, that was good.
Is this story of the milk can that seems possessed the truth, or are we simply taking a lie and milking it for all it's worth?
We'll find out whether this story is true or false at the end of our show.
So the show has definitely become meme-worthy and a meme over the years because Jonathan Frakes, there's a formula to it. So first of all, let's start from right up at the top, the show intro. I think the show intro is actually very good. You have the voice of the legendary Don LaFontaine.
Beyond belief. Fact or fiction?
When it sets the stage for what the show is, and then it cuts right to Jonathan Frakes, and he comes in, says some cheesy line. Well, that's actually before the intro.
Yeah, seasons 1 and 2, they would have James Brolin or Jonathan Frakes walk out, and like they were so like cut for time, oftentimes even before he finishes his sentence.
Fact or fiction? Are they really that different?
Beyond belief.
And then like season 3, I bet Frakes was like, I'm not going to walk in just to walk back out and walk in again. Because he would walk in, say that line, cut to the intro, and then it would go to the next part and it would show him walking in again. So I guarantee after season 2, he's like, I'm not going to walk in twice. Because I noticed when I started season 3, it just went straight to the intro.
Straight to the intro,
like,
okay.
Oh. But I think the best part of every episode, I think it's the most fun, every episode opens up with some sort of illusion or trick that Jonathan Frakes would show you. Show you a picture of a guy. See this right here? Looks like an honest man, right? But when we flip it and like he turns the picture of the drawing of the guy and it writes out liar. Like a bunch of those cool little optical illusions. Some of them I remember from school myself. I'm like, oh yeah, that's so neat. And he would use that to like, now, blah, 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 you didn't believe this, so don't believe everything you see here tonight. I'm like, okay.
Take this cake on a plate. Is there only one slice taken out? When viewed from the opposite side, there's only one slice left.
Yeah, it was always a trick to kind of right off the bat of the show make you, again, kind of reinforce the theme of the show. And it's funny because he says that, like, keep that in mind tonight when you're deciphering what's real and what's not. But there is no way to decipher what's real and what's not.
Oh, no.
No matter what the story is, there's no hints, there's no tips, there's no like themes of like, oh, when this happens, it's usually fake. No, it's literally completely random, and we'll talk more in depth about that.
There's no way to guess. It's a flip of a coin.
Those were all really good. There were, like you said, some of the classic ones, like the 2 lines that are the same length but look different.
Yeah.
The rabbit duck, or it's a rabbit one way, a duck. A lot of them that you'll see on the internet still to this day. But there were a couple, like that liar one was good. Or there's one where it's a picture of a clown, and then when he flips it, it's a whole circus. Like there was a few pretty intricate good ones.
But there's also similar to how many episodes ended with, oh, so and so's been dead for 10 years. There's a couple of them where they were basically repeats. Like there was a couple of them where like the objects were the same size in the distance.
Yeah.
Oh, they really ran out of them.
Yeah, for sure.
There was definitely like 3 or 4 repeats. Like,
And-
not filmed this, but same type of objects.
And you know for a fact, I mean, I guarantee this, that every season, Jonathan Frakes filmed all of his parts in 1 or 2 days. Like, it has to be the case.
Are you sure, dude? You know how much like stuff they brought in? Like, how many props and like little sets they brought? That's a lot of shit.
I know,
And
but...
do you think he just? And he didn't memorize all that. I think you can tell he was reading off a
Oh, yeah.
teleprompter.
Yeah.
I mean, I also got this praise. Every segment is about 7 to 9 minutes, even though they can feel like an hour if they're bad. But it's about 7 to 9 minutes, and like the amount of set work, especially when it's like a period piece where it's like they have like I don't know, 1900s like early 1900s cars and costumes. It's like for a 7 to 9 minutes like segment, they really went all out. I give the show credit for giving a lot of people work, but some of those people did not do well with that work. Some of the worst performances I've ever seen.
You must give me your word that you'll stop killing trees.
But I can't. It's my work.
Then you must live in your paper prison.
Can't take this anymore!
To the point where if I see just a decent performance, it's stuck in my head. Like, that guy did so good. Like the one that's stuck in my head now is the music store guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that guy was so genuine and believable. Where I'm like, that was so. Plus, his co-stars were absolute dog shit.
yeah.
That helps.
You're way too loud, guys. Even I could hear you.
What are you talking about?
You see, the thing is, ears are delicate little machines. You can mess them up real easy. Forever.
If it ain't loud, it ain't rock and roll, old man.
It's funny that the weakest part of the show by far is the bulk of the show, which is the segments themselves. Not the stories. Like, all of the segments, for the most part, work well as entertaining short stories. But the actually putting them to screen, the acting is terrible. And the adaptation from a short story that's really unbelievable to writing it for a TV thing is terrible. Almost every segment plays like you're reading a book.
I thought you said you were coming to bed.
I'm coming right now. George was already in bed. My fear of the mirror was doing nothing to solve the very real problems we had in our relationship. Yet deep down, I felt we still loved each other, and I wanted to be a strong partner for him.
It's a good point how it's literally like a teleplay from a book. Like, as if like a book writer, they literally copy and paste it from a book onto the script. It's so, part of me thinks like, do you think your audience is that dumb? Like, to the point where you have to spell everything out to a painful level where like people like us who just actually watch the show, it's like, oh my God, it's like no subtlety at all. One of my favorite segments was the politician one, the debate one.
It wasn't me feeding Quigley his lines that night. It was Abraham Lincoln.
Like, I could have figured that out.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Absolutely. And I agree with you that it's all so bad from that perspective that when you come across something actually good and creative and well done, you're like, oh, wow, it's noteworthy. One example that I saw was there's an episode where this mom goes to a garage sale of like this guy who always, she says that he does garage sales every weekend, and he has like it's either like a chalkboard, yeah, and she, you know, he sees that she's interested in it, so he starts like trying to sell her. He's like, oh, you know, that's really valuable, you know, and she's like, I'll give you 50 cents, and he's like, sold.
Yeah,
and then
little moments like that are great.
$5.
I'll give you 50 cents.
Sold.
What the fuck was that? I'm like, what is this oddly, randomly good direction?
There's never very few times is there anything unique like that ever.
Yeah.
And sometimes your mind goes to mush because it's 5 establishment shots by like the same set of directors. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of different directors, but also like just following the script, where it's like so many just like pan shots of whatever building they're at. I'm just like, oh. I don't know what it is. 7 to 9 minutes, but 5 establishment shots in the same it just warps your brain into thinking this is the slowest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then when the segment's over, it's like, oh, thank God. Especially when it's bad, and especially when so many have the same type of resolution. So and so's been dead for 10 years.
Yeah.
I had the so and so appraised, and it's worth $50,000. Now I can pay off my bills. It's like, oh.
Yeah. Let's quickly try to categorize all the main tropes. So you have One of the people in the story has been dead for many years, and
That's
it's a
the main
ghost.
one. We've been making that joke for years.
Yeah. They find something valuable from a relative's spirit that guides them to finding it, which is worth money and helps them out of a situation like student debt or something like that.
Yep.
Or helps them open their shop or whatever. There is the... What else do we have? There is the out-of-body experience where they think they see somebody and they keep following them, but they can't quite reach them. And then at the end, they were leading them to either save a life or something happened. And then kind of in that same vein, something goes wrong in your house. If anything ever goes wrong in your house, it's because there's an old person dying somewhere near you. You have to go find them.
Oh, yes. Like, similar to that one is the chalkboard. Remember that?
Yeah, and that's I actually do like that one, even though the acting's terrible. But the idea of it was pretty haunting to me. Of when they would draw on the chalkboard, it was the janitor's voice.
Okay, that's it. I promise I'll never cut Jim again.
Like, at least that's creative. As to where like one of them I saw was like, oh man, our faucet keeps dripping. Oh, let's call the repairman. The old woman is dying downstairs. Like, it's just like the faucet dripping, The other big meme-worthy thing is at the end of every segment, he has a pun relating to that segment that we love Jonathan Frakes' grin from Star Trek, but for us, it originated here, even though this is after TNG. His grin after every pun.
Does the story of the deadly diamond sound like an out-and-out lie, or does it bear the ring of truth?
He has that moment where he pauses and his eyes get big, and he's like, "Oh, it's my favorite thing ever." That, in addition to the segments, that was our favorite part.
Yes.
When it was you and I would get like, "Let's see what the pun's gonna be. Let's see what the pun," and we'd either go, "Ah," or it's like, "Oh, that was shit."
Yeah, and it was so great too because you can tell just a few of them he relishes more than others. Like when he enjoys the pun.
It let it sit with his smile for a bit where he's like, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and then the last thing on him, which is also great, at the end of the show when they're revealing what's true and fake, and him just absolutely appreciating every time the story's fake, because he thinks that he got you every single time.
If you thought this one sounded like it might be true, we got you. This one's made up. Was this story too far-fetched to be true? Our research shows absolutely nothing. This one never happened.
Even it's like he doesn't know what you think, but he thinks they got you every time.
It's funny because there's also ones where he's like, "You think the story was true? It's not. The total fabrication." Where
where he's just serious.
Yeah, it's a total lie. It's like, why are you serious about this one?
yeah, true. Yeah.
Was this story inspired by an actual event? Not on your life. It's a lie.
When he like gives it a pause for a second, you're not sure. Like he's like, could this have really happened? Yes, it's true. It's like, oh damn, he's so great at the delivery of those. I think that's why he got the job and stuck around. Like he's so great.
Yeah, I feel like we got to talk about season 1 just briefly. Horrible set. It was just spotlights. James Brolin is not the charismatic host.
How many of us have experienced unhappiness in our jobs?
3 or 4 of his episodes, one of the segments was just a story.
Yeah, just him talking.
Just him talking. And I remember texting you, it's like, is this fucking for real? Is he just telling a story?
Yeah.
The train has already started to move. So quickly, the actor rushes to the edge of the platform, reaches down, and with all his might, pulls the young student to safety.
I'll just quickly say on James Brolin, he at least looked like he was bought into it. Like he didn't seem like he hated being there. I mean, he didn't have quite the grins of Jonathan Frakes, but he enjoyed it. Like he'd be like, no, it's fake. Like, he was all right. I'm glad it became Jonathan Frakes, but I can still watch those episodes. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I can't even watch those. Like, it's not as good, but he was fine. But Jonathan Frakes just is so good that he can't compare. And that also leads me to one of my other things about this show, and also kind of why it has this legendary status to me. You can't find really anything about this show anywhere. Like, I tried to look up, why did James Brolin leave? What, did they fire him? Did he quit? There's nothing. I can't find one single instance of him ever even acknowledging the show, which is, I get it, because it's one season, for him. But then I try to look into, even stuff with Jonathan Frakes. He's done a few interviews and stuff about it, especially, like, recently, which we'll talk about, but, like, this show was never physically released officially. It only finally went to streaming a number of years ago because FilmRise bought it and distributed it, so now it's on Prime and Peacock and a few other places. But before that, it was like Night Visions, except it was a much more popular show. So, like, there's no DVDs anywhere that are official. Like, it's just baffling to me. But lastly on that, I don't know if you're aware of this, a couple years ago, the show did get rebooted in Germany with Jonathan Frakes as the host.
Yeah, he texted me that. I was doing some research today just on the show. Yeah, and like I saw some like recent screenshots of like Jonathan Frakes now like in his little office. I'm like, oh, this is weird, but only in Germany, huh?
Yeah, I guess it was. It was popular here, but it's like insanely popular over there. So it's interesting and also annoying because the whole show, from what I read, is filmed and produced here in America. English actors speaking English, Jonathan Frakes speaking English, and then the entire show is dubbed to German and only shows in Germany. There's nowhere you can get it online. There are even German streaming services that have it that you can't access if you're not, like, you'd have to have a VPN to access it, but it's all dubbed in German. So you can't, there's no English, like, availability of it. Hopefully that changes and that comes out one day. I find it very interesting. I thought at first, like, oh, Jonathan Frakes will be here in America in English, but everything else will be German actors. But no, it's all produced in LA.
We're talking about Don LaFontaine, and he's a legendary voice. He's what really helped carry the show, in my opinion, like his legendary just aura. And then season 4, it was recast to Campbell Lane, who, in my opinion, just was not the fit. Was not the fit. I don't know. Don LaFontaine died in 2008, and the show like ended in 2002. I was also doing like it started in like what 97, ended in 2002. Like it said like here there was like breaks of like between like season 3 and 4. There was like a 2-year stint in between that, which I think is crazy. It started airing on Fox, I believe, but the airing schedule was really sporadic, and the last season was in 2002 until the whole German reboot. It was picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel for reruns from 2002 to 2005, and then the Chiller Channel reruns in 2009 to 2015, so that makes sense that we saw it there. So at the end of every episode, it's like, all right, now it's time to find out which stories are fact and which are fiction. And Jonathan Frakes, what about the story about the basketball players and the Heavenly Angel? And they would recap the episode, and they would show clips, the worst possible clips to recap the episode.
Does not give you any context.
So if someone just walked in blind and like saw the clip they showed, you just go, what? Like, what was that story about? Like, horrible.
Yesterday, for helping me with those dudes.
When was this supposed to take place?
The guy with the knives. Just before dark.
You ever seen me here after 5 o'clock?
Was this story inspired by an actual event?
Not only were they the worst clips to choose in a lot of cases, but a lot of times they would go on forever, almost like they're re-airing the segment. Cut it short, man. Like, I feel like sometimes they just had to hit that runtime, so they just like they put it all there.
Some of the worst editing, sometimes. Like, I don't know who the editors were, but they were dog shit. Like, I wouldn't say maybe editors for the segments were okay sometimes, but like. The person who ever edited from the intro to the Frakes stuff to and the sound design, just like it was never good. It was never solid. It was something's getting cut, something doesn't make sense. It was a mess.
Talk about some of our favorite segments, and then we can get into least favorite segments if we have any. It's hard to have like a favorite episode because it's so rare to get 5, banger episodes. But I think we both do have one. Mine is the season premiere of season 3, with the. I don't want to spoil any of them, but like with the pregnant, it starts off with a pregnant teenage girl who's never had sex.
You and Jason made a mistake.
I know what it must look like, but it's impossible. I never had sex with Jason or anyone, I swear.
There's a wax executioner story, one about a creature in a hospital, and then it ends with a carnival ring toss story.
What kind of game are you playing, old man?
Ring toss.
But I always like the most when the show does dive deeper into the supernatural horror elements, because that's what I like. So the coincidence stuff or the they died 10 years ago stuff is fine, but when it would delve more into the horror and then some of it would be true, I did really love those episodes a bit more. I think they really got into that like later as the show went on with a few of the episodes.
Mine, I believe it was season 4, episode 7, where I remembered every single sketch. The woman meeting the old lady in the park and drawing her picture.
She wouldn't take her coat off. I don't think she was cold. She just didn't want to part with it.
Are you all right? I'm fine. Stop worrying.
Remember that one?
I think that's the only segment I've seen that Jonathan Frakes does not do a pun at the end. And
that makes sense.
It includes the Holocaust in the story, so I wonder if they thought, like, oh, it's such serious material that we're not going to make some type of pun.
Was this family reunited through mere happenstance? Or was some greater power at work here?
If they purposely did that, that's pretty tasteful.
I would think they did, yeah.
So what are you going to do, a Holocaust pun?
But there's a great story that I don't even remember ever watching where these two lovers break up and they're both listening to the radio. Oh, Stephen and Brenda, please come down to the pier. And they both go down to the pier.
I remember this one, yeah.
Yeah, not going to spoil it, but I remember the ending of that one. I'm like, that's so fucking cool.
Yeah, creepy comics with the comic book writer who gets fired. And the ending of that one is probably, especially as a kid, but, you know, even rewatching now, probably one of the more, like, horror, scary endings to a segment.
What do you think, Kip? Scary enough for you? Are you scared yet, Kip? Am I scaring you now, Kip?
That really got me when I was younger, but it was still pretty chilling today. I also like, this is just more of a funny one, about the guy who puts the hit on his wife and then cancels it. That one's just funny.
Just a typical schlub. It's like, I get it. Like, these people are probably given like 2 pages of words and they have to craft an entire character.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I guess I'm a character. I can never say that word. I'm a cardboard cutout of a person. So it's, some of the roles are so like cheesy to the point where it's like, oh, okay, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, and then another one that's kind of weird and out there, but I really like, is the woman who's extremely vain and gets a curse put on her for her looks.
I couldn't believe anything could go so wrong. I'm hideous.
So that she always sees herself as ugly. Love that one. And then it kind of similar to that is where someone meets a beautiful woman who gives her a makeover, and then when she meets her again, she's no longer kind of the same, I guess I'll put it.
You hardly used any makeup. What did you do?
It was a gift. From me to you. Accept it as that.
Wait, let me take you to lunch.
And stuff like that. That's more of like the more, you know, tales that you would hear, like Tales Through Time, you know, magical stuff per se, that I really enjoyed. But I still think, after watching the entire show, the most ridiculous segment has to be the fat guy with the TV segment in the first season. That has to be the most ridiculous one. And there's a lot of ridiculous ones, but nothing, I think, tops that.
Set him down! Set him down!
Brad Lewis, recently divorced and now unemployed, believes that television was responsible for saving his life.
And it's like it doesn't even end like with a happy ending. It's just
just a stupid story all around. I mean, there's a lot of ridiculous ones, but I think that one gets me the most.
I got to talk about Robert Traylands, right? So I kind of just did a little research. Like, who is this fucking guy? They keep talking about him. So yeah, he's an author. He's reportedly authored more than 250 books, including some pornography, and used many pseudonyms, per se. In 1966, he wrote Strange Events Beyond Human Understanding, a collection of stories of the paranormal. Some of his stories were adapted for television in 1992 in CBS's Miracles and Other Wonders. In 1997, Trayland's tales were adapted for the TV show Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. So they just pull... So, like, I don't think Robert Trayland's directly worked for the show. I just think, like, they had his book. Like, oh, we can make that into a...
Yes, it's fact. According to first-hand interviews conducted by author Robert Traylands.
So they gave him credit, like, first-hand interviews by Robert Traylands, but really it was stories that Traylands wrote that he said were true, I think.
That explains a lot of them, for sure. And that's why the whole fact and fiction thing, it's fun, like, at the end of the shows to try to guess, you know, and, like, you kind of get to learn the show, like, okay, if it starts off with a fake one, the second one's probably going to be true, or you know, there's already been 2 fake ones, these are probably true, you know, trying to find, like, the rhythms in the show, because then sometimes it'll completely throw you off, and, like, one episode later on, I watched 4 of them were fake. And only 1 was true, and I'm like, this never happens. And then opposite of that, sometimes there'll be 4 true ones and 1 fake. I don't think they ever did all 5.
No, I saw that they always had at least 1.
Yeah, but those 4 and 1s would throw you off. You're like, whoa, because you start switching your answers. Like, oh, well, the last one is fake. Maybe this one's true. You know?
You think it's always going to be, oh, it's 2 or 3, 3 or 2. But no, a few times they were 4 and 1.
So that's what, but with that being said, I never put, even as a kid, I never put much stock into like these are true stories, because even James Brolin more so does it, but Jonathan Frakes too, both say like up front, these are inspirations for the stories we're showing you tonight. Anything can be an inspiration for the story. So I've always looked at it as like, choosing whether it's fact or fiction is just like a fun little nugget. Like it's not like the whole reason, the whole basis of the show. But I would still recommend this show.
Oh, I would absolutely recommend this show. Absolutely, it's fun. I'm glad we didn't spoil anything for you, because that'll make it more fun for you if you do watch it. Let's give some credit to some actors here that I saw that I think some people will understand. I know you'll recognize this one. Remember the woman who's like, oh, I can't find love? Ashley Lawrence. She was the main girl from Hellraiser.
Oh,
remember Hellraiser?
yeah.
When you sent me reviews of every movie. David Denman, Roy from The Office. Danny Trejo. Roy Brocksmith from Total Recall and the Peak Performance Star Trek episode. Aaron Douglas from the Battlestar Galactica miniseries. Mickey Jones, only mentioning because he was in Total Recall as the miner guy. Mackenzie Gray from Grave Encounters, one of our favorite movies. Aldous and Edwin Hodge, twins. Aldous Hodge was Hawkman from Black Adam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Edwin was in The Purge. And you got to bring up the GOAT, the trifecta GOAT, Lorena Gale, who was in the Battlestar Galactica miniseries, Night Visions, and Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. That's a hard-working actor right there. So I just had to give a shout-out to those people. Also, I wanted to bring this up as well. So many, stock sound effects are used in this show. I get it. They don't have a lot of time. Like, there's one that's burned into my brain is, like, a door opening or closing sound effects. I mean, I'm not a genius to discover this. I've heard Red Letter Media talk about these sound effects before, and, like, now they're stuck in my head, how they're repeated so many times. I mean, I get it. They're not going to waste any time recording new sound for this,
And the score of the show, too, repeated. The sound effect, not like the real door opening, but like the fake sound effects, too. Like the, or the, just like the moody sound effects they put in are like classic, just like every time.
Yeah. Oh, but even bring this up, the inconsistency of the narration. Sometimes it's Jonathan Frakes or James Brolin. Sometimes it's a character within the episode. It's like, it's switched every time. It's like they couldn't figure it out.
Jason was far from wealthy. His foster parents couldn't afford college, so he was hoping for an athletic scholarship. He spent every day perfecting his pass-catching skills.
Yeah.
You know what? It was annoying.
It was like whoever was available that day for ADR.
But they can never just trust the audience to figure it out on their own. I get it. They have 7 minutes to tell a story, but it's like, I feel like you can do something.
And then sometimes they wouldn't even like fully finish the story in the episode, and like Jonathan Frakes would have to do cleanup duty. The one that comes to mind is the woman who's going to the vacation house and dies on the way there. This is a spoiler, but dies on the way there in a car crash, but doesn't know it. And then like the kids are running through the yard, and she eventually like sees herself dead in the newspaper, and it's like, oh, okay, why are the kids there?
Let's look at the paper again. Another accident the same day involving 6 schoolchildren.
They couldn't even fit it into the segment.
That's right, yeah. That would have helped. You make so many other things obvious, but leave this out? Like,
yeah.
I don't get it.
While this show was kind of, I would say, the inspiration or one of the big inspirations for us doing this series, it's going to be wildly different from the other shows we're covering, which is funny. And I like that because I think every show we're going to be covering here is going to be different, but this one especially, it's barely even horror, and it's just, while it really got me into anthology, like I would say Twilight Zone and then Beyond Belief, for what got me really hooked on anthology horror and anthology TV, it's just funny going back and watching this one, along with watching, Night Visions and other shows we're watching for this, because it's just so wildly different in its own thing, but that kind of makes me happy, because it's like this, it's not like so many anthology shows that are just thrown in that bucket, of like, oh, it's an anthology horror show. Like, this kind of really has its own vibe, separates itself, its own legacy, and yeah, I think it's great. It's up there.
I'm glad we got this out here, because I think this is like the longest running thing we've both watched, probably the earliest thing we've ever watched together.
Besides like wrestling.
Outside of wrestling, so this is like, it's almost like finally, I don't know, letting it go. I describe this as movie therapy, so there's like, we finally get to like put our thoughts out into the internet, and it's like, we can never talk about it again now. I'm excited to not watch this for a while. Like, I've been cramming this show to a ridiculous amount, and I'm excited to leave it alone for a bit and come back and like it in a bit. But right now, I'm like, I don't want to see it for a while.